The light in aisle 14 is the kind that turns everything too clean to be true. Bright panels humming like they're thinking for you. The shelves tall enough to make the ceiling feel like a lid. Somewhere near the toy end cap, an 8-year-old girl's breaths hitch like hiccups. Small, wet, stubborn. She presses the back of her hand to her eyes as if she can rub the tears into not existing. But tears are uneducated things. They don't know rules. Her father stands behind her, one hand hovering near her shoulder like he's holding a butterfly he can't bear to crush or let go. And over them both, a shape in dark blue fills the aisle's mouth. A police officer, broad, squared shoulders stitched with authority, thumbs a radio he doesn't need to use, boots landing with a deliberate weight that announces him before his voice ever can. He says, "Sir, what's going on here?" in a tone that is not a question but a permission slip he has already signed for himself. The father looks up. He has the weary dignity of a man who does not like crowds, but learned to live among them, jaw clenched around the brittleness that comes from 1,000 small humiliations lived and catalogued. He says, "It's okay, officer. She's overwhelmed." He gestures toward the puddle of spilled cereal at the girl's sneakers, bright circles that promised happiness still shining, with the glaze that supermarket lights give to hope. The officer tilts his head, eyes grazing the box in the cart. The father's hands, the girl's braids. He sees everything and nothing. The hum of refrigerators at the back of the store becomes the ocean you hear in seashells, a soft roar that swallows apologies. The girl hiccups again. "Daddy?" she whispers, the word so thin it might slide beneath a door without being noticed. "I'm sorry." "Nora, it's okay," he murmurs. "We'll clean it up." A store associate, a teenager with a name tag that says Lexi in block letters and a smear of glitter nail polish that refuses to be neat, kneels with a paper towel roll and a smile that trembles at the edges. "It's fine," she says. Happens all the time. It should be done. No more than a minute of human mess in a place designed to deny the existence of mess. But the officer shifts closer, the leather creaking as if the uniform itself is a living thing that leans when it smells fear. "We got a call," he says. "About a disturbance?" "A disturbance?" the father repeats, careful not to lace the word with outrage. "She dropped a box." The officer's gaze flickers to the security mirror, a funhouse eye that turns people into suspects, then back to the tiny, shuddering child, then back to the father. The air is the tension of an almost sneeze. "Identification," the officer says. There are moments so small they could hide inside the crack between seconds, but they decide everything that comes after. The father hesitates, half a beat, the time it takes to move from disbelief to compliance, then reaches for his wallet. The officer steps in, too close as if the world must shrink to fit his certainty. Somewhere behind them, an old song plays through the ceiling speakers about love and summer and how everything once tasted like sugar, and its cheerfulness feels like a lie told by someone who has never seen a hand shake like the father's does now. "Officer," Lexi tries. "It's really fine." The officer's eyes harden into the kind of ice that never melts. "It just breaks things." "Back up, miss." He doesn't look at her when he says it. He looks at the father and the girl and sees not people, but a possibility he's trained to prefer, that trouble comes stamped with certain faces. The father keeps his palms visible, offering the wallet the way you offer a cup to a parched stranger. "My name is David Ellis," he says. "We're just shopping, please." He never says please to strangers. Not like this. The officer takes the wallet as if it might explode. He asks questions that don't fit the scene: address, employer, reason for choosing this store. Each question lands like a chalk mark around a body that is not dead yet. Nora's breath keens higher, a kettle coming to boil. "Daddy," she whispers. "I'm scared." A second officer appears at the end of the aisle, slower, hand near his belt but not on it, eyes flicking between his partner and the family. The first officer's voice drops into the tone of a verdict. "Step away from the child." The father does not move. The aisle holds its breath. Somewhere a baby laughs in the next row over, that guileless, hiccuping joy. And for a split heartbeat, everything is wrong in the peculiar way only normal life can make wrongness feel. The officer shifts his stance. The girl's tears drip onto bright cereal rings, turning them into tiny stained glass windows on the floor. And then the radio crackles, 3 syllables of a dispatcher's name that will not be remembered later, because the memory will only keep what hurts. The moment chooses a direction. Before aisle 14, there was a morning, and before that morning, there were years that shaped people into the exact versions of themselves required for this one scene to exist. David Ellis was the child of a school librarian who measured time by overdue slips and school bells, and a bus mechanic who measured it by engine rattle and the rhythm of a wrench. He grew up in a neighborhood where summer smelled like cut grass and the metal tang of swing-set chains, where you learned to map your path home by which porches had adults willing to watch you cross the street with their eyes, not their hands. He learned early the art of being unremarkable, a good boy, his mother said, which sometimes meant quieting jokes on his tongue. Sometimes meant moving out of the way before anyone asked. Sometimes meant keeping his wallet in the front pocket and his voice precise. It did not mean smallness, not exactly. It meant the complicated choreography of moving through spaces designed to doubt you. He earned good grades, liked physics because its laws held no grudges, found work fixing ATMs because machines, when broken, tell the truth. He married Ruth, who could take a tangled thread of his nervousness and wind it into something neat just by reminding him to breathe. When Ruth died, breast cancer, the villain that waits politely while you make other plans, he became the kind of father whose pockets always held tissues and small candies, whose backpack always contained an umbrella and a spare pair of socks. He built a world for Nora that was made of routines. After-school snacks at 3:45, library on Wednesdays, grocery store on Saturdays. Superstores gave him hives, but they were cheaper, and cheap is how you save for braces and summer camp, and the piano lessons she will abandon for soccer. For 8 years, Nora had been the sort of child you want to fold into your coat and hide from weather. Curious, solemn, with a softness that was not weakness but an openness to being changed by what she loved. She collected words like other kids collected coins. She asked questions that started with why and ended in silence when adults could not answer. Her school counselor called her highly sensitive, in a way that made it sound like both an honor and a diagnosis. In stores, the hum of fluorescent lights crowded her head. The towers of boxes leaned in, the colors shouted. Sometimes she would press her hands to her ears and rock, not because she was ill-behaved, but because the world was simply too noisy to fit into her bones all at once. David knew this. He built routes through aisles the way you map hiking trails, shortest distance, fewest sudden strangers, always an exit that looked like a bright line. He told her, "If it's too much, squeeze my finger," and she did. And they would stand and breathe together, 2 people finding the same size for their lungs. Now for the officer. Officer Kent Russell was a man who believed in order. He believed in it the way some people believe in mourning, the confidence that it will arrive if you wait for it. His father had been a corrections officer. Kent grew up in a home with rules that stood like furniture, solid, unlovable, useful. If you tripped over them, you learned not to. He was average in school, good at sports, better at being told exactly what to do. When he joined the force, the badge did something to his posture, how it does to everyone. It straightened his spine and bent his mind around the particular myth that the right uniform makes the right man. If the academy taught him anything, it was that caution, over-applied, could be polished into a virtue. When you are told for years that certain neighborhoods are hot, that certain faces telegraph non-compliant, your mind learns to file people into drawers before they've opened their mouths. Kent had never set out to be a racist. That word felt like a slur reserved for cartoon villains and old men at diners. He would have objected to the label even out loud. He had a friend from the academy who was black. He held the door at the DMV for anyone. He paid for a kid's hot chocolate once when the kid's mother had a wiki card and sad eyes. But the map in his head drew invisible fences around the faces he trusted and the faces he would keep waiting. He did not notice that he asked different questions to different families, that his tone lowered, turned authoritative, when brown skin entered a scene. He did not see himself as dangerous, only as a necessary weight on a teetering world. He had taken this particular weekend shift because overtime paid for a new grill and his wife liked to host cookouts. A disturbance at the superstore sounded soft. He imagined a shoplifter with a bulging jacket, a couple yelling at a returns desk, a teenager skateboarding where don't signs said don't. He did not imagine an 8-year-old with eyes like wet glass. The superstore itself has a biography. Built 5 years ago on the bones of a dairy distribution center, it sprawled with the arrogance of new paint. It promised lower prices and more choices, which actually meant bigger quantities of the same few things and aisles arranged like mazes designed by accountants. Its cameras were numerous, its loss prevention staff undertrained. The corporate policies around escalation looked good on slides and clumsy in reality. A manager, eager to appear vigilant, had told security to call anything in that feels off. Feels off is a catch-all that catches the wrong things. A teenage assistant manager, recently promoted from the electronics cage, watched the live camera feeds like weather. He noticed, without quite naming it, that he felt more anxious when certain customers looked nervous. He saw David and Nora on his screen, the girl's hands flapping for 3 seconds, the cereal falling, the father kneeling, the store associate jogging over. Somewhere between vigilance and bias, he made the call. Potential disturbance in aisle 14. He did not say what kind. He did not say why his stomach had tightened. People arrive at scenes like this with the full freight of their histories, years of warnings from their mothers about how to talk to police, years of being told they are the police's reason for being. Lexi, the associate, grew up with a different set of rules. Her mother said, "Be kind," and meant it. She was the first in her family to think about college. She worked this job to learn the world. She had watched the videos and training modules about bias and nodded along, disappointed at how bland the language was for something so hot. She had not thought she would need anything more than common sense in ISIL 14. At the far end of the aisle, a second officer, Miguel Alvarez, paused when he saw Kent's stance. Miguel had joined the force because he wanted to be a good man in a uniform, not a man whose goodness depended on it. He knew how quickly tone became temperature, knew the difference between authority and threat could fit in the inflection of a syllable. He slowed, took in the spilled cereal, the child's tremors, the father's open hands. He felt the scene pitch toward some gravity he did not like. He noticed that Kent's jaw had set in the way it did when he felt challenged. Miguel had learned to recognize that jaw. This is how everyone arrives. A father who rehearsed how to make strangers comfortable so he and his daughter could be. A cop who mistook comfort for weakness or misbehavior for defiance, depending on the face. A store that outsourced its conscience to policy and cameras. A second cop who understood that the closest thing to justice is sometimes the willingness to step between what is and what could be. All that history, all those tiny decisions, now balanced on a thin ridge of time wide as the gray strip between tiles on a supermarket floor. Step away from the child, Kent says again, and it's not a command for safety. It's a test, a ritual line that demands performance. David's eyes flicker to Nora's. He thinks of her counselor's advice. When she's spiraling, keep the anchor close. He does not step away. He kneels instead, his palms up and open, voice soft, showing his daughter the calm he wants to conjure. "Nora, count with me," he murmurs. 4 in, 4 out. She tries, breath skittering like a bird on a window. 1, 2, 3, 4. Kent interprets kneeling as noncompliance. Bias is a translator that misreads on purpose. "Sir, I gave you an order." He reaches out, not to touch, not yet, but to mark the air with his right to the space. Miguel says Kent gently, a name offered like a speed bump. Lexi's paper towels pile into a fluffy white dignity on the floor. And she keeps talking because sometimes talking is all you have. "I'll page maintenance," she says. "I'll get a broom." "We're good." Kent's eyes don't leave David's face. "Wallet." "You have it," David reminds him, still kneeling. His voice is respectful, but there's a thread in it that tightens if you listen closely. "Please do not make me vanish in front of my daughter." "Stand up," Kent says, and the words come out like a lock clicking. David rises slowly, palms visible. "Sir," he says. He hates the way that word tastes. "I'm cooperating." My daughter's having an overload. If you give us a moment, overload? Kent repeats, a suspicion disguised as a question. Is she on something? Something in the aisle tilts. It's subtle, like the soft listing of a ship you don't notice until you set a glass down and it begins to glide. Miguel's voice carries a warning in its warmth. He means sensory overload, he says. Kids get overwhelmed in stores. The lights. He gestures upward with his chin. Kent does not follow the gesture. He says to David, "Do not move your hands." David freezes, and the freeze is familiar. Old lessons running along his nerves like electricity. Do not argue. Do not reach. Narrate your movements. Keep your voice low. He hears his mother long ago. If ever, baby. If ever. He swallows. Nora, he says, keeping his eyes on the officer, we're doing good. Look at my nose. She looks. She always looks. It is their trick for quieting the shake. Kent steps in, and the space between them becomes a compromise he refuses to make. He tugs David's wallet open with a kind of suspicion reserved for people who frighten you because they refuse to be frightening. He scans. David Ellis, he reads, as if the name can be weighed and found wanting. Address, David answers. Employer, David answers. Reason for being in this aisle. Cereal, David says, and it sounds ridiculous because bias can turn the ordinary into the implausible. We're buying cereal. Kent's eyes flicker to Nora's sneakers, damp from tears, and he says, almost satisfied, and you decided to create a scene. The language is a trap. A scene created rather than a moment happening. Sir, Miguel says, I've got it, Kent snaps, and the snap is a small violence that forecasts larger ones. From the end of the aisle, a manager in a blue vest appears, cheeks flushed, smile trembling. Officers, he says, is everything... Kent holds up a hand without looking, and the manager's smile retracts like a turtle. He backs away, grateful to be dismissed from responsibility. Nora's breath is louder now, the sound you hear when a child cries in a bathroom stall and you can do nothing but listen. David says, Nora, squeeze my finger, and she does. Tiny pulse against his skin. Kent's hand hovers near his belt. He says, I need you to step aside. David does not. My daughter is frightened, officer. If you could give her a moment, we'll be out of your way. You're in everyone's way, Kent says, and the sentence carries more weight than grammar can explain. Everyone's is a nation sometimes. In that word, Kent empties the aisle of individual people and fills it with a standard only he can see. Lexi sees it. She sees how Nora is shrinking into herself, how David's shoulders are turning into a wall meant to protect, and how walls, when pushed, sometimes invite siege. She finds her voice again. I can bring water, she says to Nora, directly to her, giving her personhood that feels like a rope thrown across a river. Cold water. It helps me when I'm anxious. Nora nods. A flicker. Kent says, no one moves. He isn't talking to Nora. He is talking to the world. The second officer weighs the moment and makes a choice. Miguel steps closer, angling his body so that he shares the visual field with both Kent and David, a triangulation meant to pull the tension apart. Mr. Ellis, he says, using the name anchoring him. Is it okay if I kneel beside Nora so I'm smaller? Sometimes that helps. David's eyes meet Miguel's. There is no suspicion in them, just an inventory of risk. He nods once. Miguel kneels, palms open at his sides. Hi, Nora, he says quietly. I'm Miguel. My little niece cries at fireworks because they're too loud. These lights are like fireworks that don't stop, huh? Nora studies him through tears, measuring safety the way children do with an accuracy adults forget. She gives the smallest nod. Can I count with you? Miguel asks. We can do the 4 in, 4 out. Your dad's good at it. I can be good at it too. Okay, she whispers. They breathe together, the three of them, an unlikely chorus. The aisle's hum seems to ease by 1 decibel. The cereal, sticky now, glues itself to the floor in a pastel mosaic. Kent's jaw flexes. He has become background to a scene he thought he owned. He says louder, Sir, you're obstructing. Obstructing what? David says, the question soft but edged. He cannot help the human need to ask for logic when confronted with its absence. Isle flow? Her breath? An investigation, Kent says. Into what? It is the quietest rebellion. He is asking for paperwork in the middle of a heartbeat. Miguel says, Kent, there's no crime here. Kent's eyes finally slice toward his partner. We got a call, he says. I am responding. In his voice is the righteousness of a man who believes his job must be the reason for the job. And you're escalating, Miguel says, steady. Everyone is safe. Kent hears it as criticism instead of fact. Something hardens. The radio at his shoulder hisses another nothing, static and a name and the jitter of a system that wants to be helpful. Stand up, Kent orders Miguel. Let me do my job. Miguel does not stand. He lowers his voice further with care. My job is to keep everyone safe. That includes children. The word children has gravity. In a different world, it would anchor the scene. In this one, it pries up an ugly thing from under the floorboards. Kent's cheek twitches. Sir, he barks at David again, louder. Step away from the child. He moves in without waiting for the response, and his hand lands, not hard yet, but claiming, on David's forearm. David flinches because he is human, because he has been taught for decades to fear the touch that arrives in blue. Nora's breath snaps, a high, thin note. Lexi says, please, without knowing who she's pleading with. The manager peeks around a display of dish soap and retreats again. A woman with a baby stroller pivots and backs out of the aisle like a ship reversing, unwilling to be a witness. You can feel the air searching for an outcome that won't hurt. It cannot find one quickly enough. It happens the way storms do, not from one cloud, but from a sky that has been preparing itself. Kent's grip tightens. David's body answers the old instinct to pull back from pain and danger. He leans toward Nora instead, making himself taller, wider, a shield of presence. Don't touch my dad, Nora cries, the words loud enough to crack open other aisles. It is the first time her voice has skated above a whisper since the cereal fell. She is crying, yes, but there is an edge to it now, a defense that small creatures grow when they realize they must make themselves sound big to be believed. Kent registers volume as threat. His other hand ghosts toward his belt, a movement that drags the world closer to a cliff. Miguel rises half an inch off his kneel, palms still open. Kent, he says, urgency under the syllable. Stop. Back up, Kent snaps. He says it to everyone and to no one. Sir, he tells David, if you resist, you will be detained. Detained is a word that pretends to be neutral. It is not neutral. David hears it and sees cold benches and fluorescent lights and a child's face pressed to a window. He says, careful as surgery, I am not resisting. You are holding me. Please release my arm. You're interfering, Kent says, and this is the linchpin of so many stories, that disobedience is defined as any refusal to accept being hurt. Nora lunges, a tiny body electric with panic, toward the space between Kent and her father. Miguel moves faster than thought. It's training, but it's also love. And he slides his forearm gently across her path, not to restrain, but to steer. He turns his body to create a new barrier, soft and human and present. Nora, he says, and he is breathless now. I've got you. Look at me. You're safe. Behind them, a security camera watches without understanding. Lexi's hands shake so hard the paper towels jitter like birds. She whispers, please, again to the air. The superstore's soundtrack cheerfully reminds everyone that prices are falling. Kent pulls David a half step. This is not a strike, not a shove, but it is an attack of a different sort. The assertion of force without need, violence wrapped in policy. David's shoulder twists. Pain flickers across his face. He does not cry out. He swallows it because he has taught his body to digest indignities to keep his child from learning their flavors. Miguel straightens to his full height, and he is not tall, but right now he is immense with purpose. Kent, the name is a stop sign. Hands off. Kent turns his head, and in that second, something inside the scene changes direction. Miguel steps in, deliberately crossing that invisible line which officers pretend is literal. He places his hand, firm, professional, unambiguous, on Kent's wrist and peels it from David's arm. The gesture is not dramatic, but it is decisive. That's enough, Miguel says. The aisle breathes. Kent's eyes go flat, a door slamming. You're undermining me, he says. and there is a boyish hurt in it that would be tender if the stakes were not a child's terror. "I'm stopping harm," Miguel replies. "Look at her." He dips his chin toward Nora, whose chest is hopping with inhales. "We are officers of the peace. There is no peace in what you're doing." For a second, the argument is a coin that could land on either side. A voice crackles over the radio, dispatch asking for a status update. Kent takes a step back, but not far. He is making calculations. He can retreat gracefully or double down. Pride is a poor accountant. It frequently miscounts the cost of various futures. "I'll handle the report," Miguel says, crisp, claiming bureaucratic ground as a way to create moral ground. He turns to David. "Mr. Ellis, I'm sorry for the alarm. Can we step to the end of the aisle so Nora can have space?" The apology is a rope ladder lowered into a hole. David nods, slow, still coiled. He moves with exquisite care, the choreography of a man who knows that movement itself can be misread. He keeps one hand at Nora's shoulder and narrates quietly, "We're walking, sweetheart, toward the nice officer. 3 steps." Nora lets herself be guided. Her sneakers make tiny wet sounds against the floor. They arrive at the mouth of the aisle, where a display of sun hats pretends the world is simple elsewhere. Lexi hovers several paces away, watery-eyed, still holding the paper towels like a flag of truce. "Can I get that water now?" she asks. Miguel nods. "Please!" She vanishes and returns with a bottle the temperature of mercy, uncaps it, hands it to Nora like a sacred thing. Nora drinks. The act is so basically human that the aisle loses a little of its menace. Kent watches, jaw ticking. He is the only person in the scene who has not consciously softened. A small cluster of customers has formed at the far end of the aisle, their curiosity hungry, their decency uncertain. The manager has placed himself nearby in case later he needs to say he was present. The radio hisses again. Miguel clicks it. "Unit 12, he says evenly. "False alarm. Family required assistance. Situation under control." "Copy," dispatch replies, already bored. The words "under control" are true now, but only because a series of choices made them so. David crouches down to Nora's eye level. He is shaking. He disguises it by pretending to straighten the laces on her shoes. "You okay?" he asks. She nods, a trembling nod. "Can we go home?" He swallows. "Yes." Miguel shifts his stance, the language of bodies that want to be helpful. "Mr. Ellis, if you'd like, I can walk you to the front. We can make sure you're not bothered." It is an offer that acknowledges a second truth, that after a moment like this, even the automatic doors can feel like thresholds that would prefer you not to cross. David looks at Kent, then back to Miguel. "Thank you," he says. He does not have the energy to unpack the layers of pride and necessity inside those 2 words. They begin to move, a procession no one asked to lead. Child, father, officer, associate, onlookers parting like a confused sea. At the register, the cashier, who has been told not to get involved, gets involved anyway by meeting Nora's eyes and smiling, not pitying, just human. "Do you want a sticker?" she asks, holding up a bright star. The star is silly and exactly right. Nora takes it and presses it to her palm as if the adhesive can keep her tethered. They pay for the cereal because dignity has receipts. Miguel stands a small distance away, keeping his body language in a posture that says protection instead of possession. Kent follows, but farther back, an orbit too wide to matter now. When they reach the doors, the day outside is too bright, as if the sky has no idea what just happened under fluorescent lights. The automatic doors sigh open. Warm air rushes in, smelling like asphalt and the pine cleaner a kid used to spray the entrance. David's car is not far. He buckles Nora in with hands that finally shake openly. Miguel stops beside the driver's door. He speaks carefully, like placing fragile things on a shelf. "Mr. Ellis," he says, "you have every right to file a complaint." David looks at him, really looks, and in the officer's face he sees a man trying to be more than his training, a man who stepped between a bad outcome and a child's memory. "I know," David says. He pauses. "What's your name?" "Miguel Alvarez." "Thank you, Officer Alvarez." The words are simple and enormous. Miguel nods. "I'm sorry for my partner's conduct. I'll be writing it up. He means it." He also knows that writing it up is a trail that leads into thickets, union reps and supervisors and colleagues who will carve his motives into slices. He will do it anyway. He steps back. David starts the car. The radio plays a song that is trying too hard to be happy. Nora leans her head back. "Dad," she says, voice wobbly. "Did I make it worse?" He turns in his seat, heart tearing at the idea. "No," he says, fiercely soft. "You were brave. You were honest. That's never worse." He touches the sticker on her palm. "You held on." They pull away. Behind them, the superstore swallows the moment whole and goes on selling detergent and hope, 2 for 1. There are aftermaths no one sees, the ones that happen in kitchens and in heads. That night, David stands at the sink, hands in dishwater gone cool, and lets himself shake. The house is quiet in the way houses are when they've witnessed fear. The walls almost hum with the echo of what he didn't say. He thinks of Ruth. He thinks of the ways she softened edges, how she might have walked with Nora through the store, with a joke and a steady shoulder, and how maybe that would have been enough to make the whole scene different. He thinks of the word detained and how it sits in his chest like a swallowed coin. In her room, Nora lines up her plush animals in a parade toward the closet. They have stickers on their paws now. She narrates to them in a whisper, "We breathe in 4, out 4. She is teaching comfort to creatures made of fabric, and in doing that, she teaches it back to herself. She asks to sleep with the closet light on, and David says yes without pretending it doesn't matter. He prints 2 copies of Miguel's card and puts one in his wallet and one in a kitchen drawer labeled important. He writes down the number for internal affairs and leaves it there like a decision he can make tomorrow. In another house, Miguel sits at his table with his laptop open and a report form glowing like a dare. He chooses his words like a man building a bridge, careful, structural, mindful of the winds that will push at it. He writes, "Officer Russell escalated without clear cause. Physical contact with the civilian did not meet necessity standard." He adds specifics because specifics are harder to argue with. He knows that doing this will make him suspect in the conversations that happen in locker rooms and cars. He knows he will be called soft behind his back. He has decided that being soft where children are concerned is a credential, not a defect. He thinks about the academy classmate who once said, "If your hand's already near your belt, you're already halfway to being right," and how wrong that feels now. He thinks of his niece and the firework nights, and of Nora's eyes finding his and deciding to trust. In a third house, Kent paces. His wife asks, "Rough day?" And he says, "Just the usual," because he cannot explain the shame that comes from being stopped publicly by someone you expected to agree. He tells himself a story in which he was simply trying to maintain order and his partner undermined him. The story soothes. He scrolls through videos online that reinforce his version, the ones where cops hesitate and get hurt, the ones that say, "Suspicion is safety." He sleeps poorly, dreams of aisles, dreams of a man's quiet question, "Into what?" like a bell that won't stop ringing. At the superstore, Lexi writes a note to slip under the manager's door. "We should revisit the escalation policy." She draws a small heart beside it because she has learned that sometimes people only read softness. The manager will send an email to corporate. Corporate will reply with boilerplate about community standards and ongoing training modules. But something, somewhere, will shift. An extra line added to a slide. A role-play scenario that includes sensory overload. A what-if that mentions a father and a child and the proper use of the word assistance. And there is the aisle 14, where someone will shop 6 days from now and never know the air held a memory. If you asked David what changed in him, he might say, nothing, because he has carried this posture for a lifetime. The tilt toward caution, the need to narrate. But that is not true. What changed was the shape of his no. He files the complaint. 2 days later, not out of vengeance, but out of a desire to carve a small channel through which other men like him might walk with their children without being made to prove they belong. He uses words carefully and does not allow himself to be turned into a story about anger. He testifies for a review board that may or may not have teeth. He accepts that his voice could go into a file that will never be opened and considers that speaking is still a kind of opening. Nora begins therapy, not because she is broken, but because the world is loud and she deserves someone to help her tune it. She learns more ways to tell her body the truth, that the light is bright but not dangerous, that the aisle is long but not a tunnel, that voices can be loud without being knives. She draws a picture of a supermarket with a sun over it and a little blue uniformed figure whose face is a scribble and a second figure whose face is not. She writes in shaky letters, "Safe," next to the one. It is a child's taxonomy, and it is perfect. Miguel's report does not disappear. It becomes, for a while, an office political object. Supervisors exchange emails. Union reps flex. Someone calls Miguel into a room and asks if he is sure he wants to create division. He says, "I'm trying to create standards." It is not a line he borrowed. It is something he discovered halfway through the sentence. He cannot know what penalties his career will pay. He knows only that he will sleep better if a child's breath stays steady in aisle 14. There is a hearing. Kent sits with his jaw refusing to unclench. He says the words he has been coached to say about perception and threat and procedure. There are phrases in his mouth that taste like paper. Miguel says the words he wrote. Lexi testifies to the serial, and the tears and the tone of a voice that made her hands shake. David sits, wearing the good shirt he reserves for events where strangers decide things that affect him. He does not ornament his testimony. He says, "My daughter is 8. She was scared. She needed time. We were not given it," and lets the silence do the work. The outcome is what outcomes often are, mixed. Kent is required to attend additional training on de-escalation and implicit bias. He is given a letter of reprimand that will live in a file. No one is fired, no one is ruined, no one is fully satisfied. The world does not end. It does, however, tilt 1 degree toward the possibility that next time, in some other store, the script will be different. The next Saturday, David takes Nora to a smaller market, the kind with creaky floors and 3 cereal choices instead of 12. He tells her exactly what they will buy. She chooses the same bright circles and holds the box with both hands as if she can keep it from spilling through sheer intention. At the register, the clerk rings them up and says, "Same again next. Weak?" And David says, "Maybe, because hope is a muscle you rebuild 1 repetition at a time." In the car, Nora watches the sun on the windshield. "Dad?" she asks. "Yes." "If we see a police officer again, can we talk to them?" He swallows. "We can if you want." "I want to," she says. "I want to ask if they know Officer Miguel." He smiles, unexpected and real. "We can do that." They drive home with cereal in the trunk and stickers on the dashboard, and a world that is, if not gentler, then at least newly mapped. David's mother calls. He tells her lightly that they're fine. She hears the strain anyway and says, "I'll make dinner," because love sometimes looks like casseroles that refuse to be anything but practical. After they hang up, David sits in the driveway for a minute and breathes 4 in, 4 out, and feels the way grief and relief can coexist like weather fronts that don't touch but make the same sky. Inside, he helps Nora pour cereal, and they eat it dry from bowls, small circles on tongues that taste like childhood, like victory, like nothing more complicated than sugar. Sometimes the most radical thing is to keep the ritual. What would you have done if you'd turned into aisle 14 and seen it? That tiny girl's breath coming apart, a father's hands raised, a uniform forgetting its purpose. Where do you stand when procedure and peace point in different directions? And which one do you follow when a child is watching? If this story stirred something in you, don't let it fade with the fluorescent lights. Learn how sensory overload looks in kids. Speak up when you see escalation masquerading as order. Ask your local store and your city to train for de-escalation that centers children and dignity. Share this with someone who needs the reminder. Authority exists to protect the smallest voices, not to drown them.